This is how to shade a sphere in graphite. So you're gonna want to get some pencils. I have a 2H, an HB, a 4B, a 6B, a couple erasers, and if you want, a blender. Doesn't really matter which ones you get. Just make sure you get kind of a darker, like a 6B or a 4B, maybe a 2H and then an HB, just so you have some options. And then let's get started. So the key is you want to go very, very slow. I'm using the side of my pencil, so I'm not going to use the tip of the pencil. The tip of the pencil is going to make some really dark lines, and you can see there's something on the table, so I had to move it. But you want to just use the side of your pencil and go really, really slow. I'm shading in little circles, and I'm starting with the mid-tones. So I'm starting with my HB pencil. I always usually start with the HB, and I usually start around where the mid-tone shadows are. And like I said, I'm just kind of shading in little circles or little lines that overlap. And I'm not rushing, I'm just taking my time. And I just want you to see like how long this actually takes. For some of this video, I'm going to speed it up. But to do this whole sphere probably took me at least 30 minutes. So I'm just building up the layers, and then remember, if you're shading a sphere, it hugs the sphere, so that shadow is going to hug it. It's going to go around. It should not just be a straight line. So think about the moon. It's going to be like a crescent shape. So I'm shading all the way down to the bottom. And then as I do a second layer, now I'm going to add a little bit more pressure. And so here's where I'm going to start speeding up. So I'm adding more pressure, still the same HB pencil. But now I'm going to start to add darker value into the shadow section. And then I always bring it back up though. I want to try to make a smooth transition. Remember, this is a smooth edge. I want to make a smooth transition from the darker value to the lighter value. I shouldn't see a definite line or edge to where one value starts and the next stops. It should be a really nice subtle gradation. So now I'm going to go in with my darker pencil. I believe this is my 4B. And then darken that shadow area. And I'm using the same thing. I'm using the side of my pencil, little strokes that overlap, kind of circular, kind of linear strokes. Everybody has their own style with this, so you don't necessarily have to do exactly the way I do it. Some people have some really interesting mark making, just as long as you're building up that value. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my darkest, which is my 6B. So I'm really going to darken that dark value. So I'm really bringing out the shadow part, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm using the side of my pencil. You can see I'm even kind of holding it in a different way. And again, small overlapping circular type strokes. And then I bring it up a little bit, but when I bring it up, I'm releasing the pressure, so I'm not pressing as hard. And then I'm going to do my cast shadow. So when I do the cast shadow, that is when I'm going to use the tip of the pencil, because I want that to be as dark as possible. The cast shadow has the darkest value, and that's going to make the sphere kind of really pop. And then I'm going to bring it out. But as the shadow gets further out, it does get lighter, because then all of a sudden light will start bouncing off of things. So right under the sphere is the absolute darkest. And then don't forget, there is that little crescent of reflected light from the surface to the sphere. So that's why I'm leaving that little kind of light area right there. So then I go back over it with my HB. So I kind of go back and forth, and now I'm kind of going to bring this up into my mid-tone and into the highlight. So the highlight, it's kind of up to you. You can shade it really, really, really lightly if you want, or you can leave it completely white. It really would depend on what the actual value or color of your sphere is, but as long as your highlight is the absolute lightest part. And then remember, everything hugs that sphere, so I don't want there to be a definite line right there. And then this is my 2H pencil. The 2H is probably the hardest to shade with just because it's such a hard graphite. It doesn't blend as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a blender, which is optional. If you're going to use a blender, you need to be really careful not to overuse the blender, because what happens is it's going to start to look like mashed potatoes. So you can use it to soften the edges and blend things together. See, I almost used my finger there too. Do not use your finger. You can get oils on your finger on the paper and it'll leave a smudge. But as I do that, I always go back over it with the pencil. I don't want it to just look like a blob. And every now and then you kind of want to make sure you're using a clean edge of the blender, because you don't want to just smear values everywhere. So especially when you're smudging a darker value, make sure if you take it and go over a lighter value, it doesn't bring that pencil with you. So I always go back over it with a pencil, so I still have some of those pencil lines in there. And this is just tricky, trying to get it to blend smoothly without that definite edge. So it's kind of, I go back and forth until I get it the way I like. But use the blender sparingly. If you can, don't use the blender at all. But if it's a look that you like, you can use it. I'll allow you to use it. Just if you start to overuse it, I will take it away from you. You can also use a rolled up tissue too. I almost like those better. So I'm just refining the edges. And then I do erase back out with my eraser. I really like to use my eraser as a drawing tool as well. A gum eraser works okay. Really, a kneaded eraser, the gray ones, really work really good for taking out graphite without taking out too much. So I'm constantly just kind of going back and forth and refining and blending as I go. And like I said, you just got to be careful not to over blend. So I have a lot of dark graphite there, so it's really easy to just push it up and get, all of a sudden I don't have any midtones anymore. And I'm just dabbing that out a little bit. And then once you get done with your sphere, your final step is to create a background. So once you start on the background, I don't use the blender at all, so give a little bit of a different type of look to the background than the sphere, since the sphere is nice and smooth. And that little tool that I'm using is a very precise eraser. If you would like to play around with it, just ask me in class. I can get you one. Alright, let's do the background and then we'll be finished. So I'm using the tip of my pencil right next to the sphere to really try to make it super dark so the sphere will stand out. And then I'm kind of leaving some of the texture in the paper, but I'm just kind of fading it out as I go. And then I use a 2H on the bottom. And then I also will shade a different direction to just kind of make the line, the mark making kind of make the sphere stand out. So you can use the direction of your marks to help create a texture to kind of help the eye go where you want it to go. Alright, I'm just about finished. There are a few finger smudges, but let's label. So remember, we're going to label our 5 parts. So there is our highlight. This is our mid-tone, which is a little bit dark to be honest, but that's our mid-tone. Our shadow. Our cast shadow right underneath the sphere. So remember, cast shadow is the darkest part. And then the reflected light. So make sure you label your sphere, and then you are going to glue this into your sketchbook page and have me check it off before you move on. I can't wait to see your work. Good job, guys.